Welcome to the Soul Tribe Podcast. The Soul Tribe Podcast was created to help you navigate through the world of spirituality, wellness, and self-development in an easy, grounded, and relatable way. We break down everything from the Akashic Records, manifesting, spirituality, and so much more. We want to help expand your boundaries and bring the spiritual world to you in a fun and easy way. Get ready to be inspired with tips, tools, and easy to digest information. Let's do this.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Tribe Podcast. Today we're going to talk a little bit about DNA, and I want to talk about some stuff about the DNA, which Lorna's like, okay, you take over, this is more your thing. But I want to talk about different aspects of DNA. The first thing I wanted to comment was that I'm thinking it's super important for us to just be aware of it and talk about it, because it came to me first when I channeled a episode of the Patreon where, you know, the Akashic Records got more into how important our DNA is. And then when I think about it, so I can't remember everything they said in that podcast episode, or Patreon, sorry, the Patreon episode, but what I got from it that I can remember now is that it's so important, because if you think about it, our soul says, I'm going to go and be born in that body over there. And when the soul picks that body, the soul knows the lineage that it comes with, because the soul's picking the mom and the dad, right? And the soul knows the cell structure and the DNA structure and the ancestral line that comes with that mom and that dad. And so the soul's picking it on purpose because it's going to help its mission. It's going to help its purpose for whatever reason, right? Yeah. I had heard a theory not the other day, like maybe about a year or two ago. I had heard a theory and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that. It talked about how a lot of really, really like mass amounts of channelers and more spiritual people come from South America. And that's because our structure and the way our ancestors were and are and the way we are, because of all that stuff that comes together, it makes us more passionate. And apparently that level of determination or passion, or, you know, Hispanics' life aren't easy, right? There's a lot of resistance that comes with being Hispanic. I mean, it depends a lot on what part of which country you're living in, but we're used to not having things easy. And apparently that brings into our awareness a way of like being more outside of the box, fixing things more for ourselves. Nothing's ever guaranteed for us, kind of thing. And apparently all these things that they were talking about, apparently all these things create a really good scenario for someone who's open to channel, on top of the fact that apparently the DNA structure for someone that's Hispanic, with that and the passion, that DNA, all of that comes together and creates a really good kind of like explosion of ability to connect easier or better.
Interesting.
It's an interesting theory, isn't it?
Where'd you hear that?
I don't remember, because it was many years ago. But it was. I think also
you know what comes up is like the ancestral stuff too. Right? Like I think about the Mayans and I think about all these things.
I'm so fascinated. Like I never really read about or looked into the Mayans, but you would expect them. I mean, I think it depends, because I don't know about you, but I've heard versions where they were evil and they cut off people's heads for sacrifices, and then you hear versions of like how connected they were to Gaia and things like that. So I don't know which one to kind of focus on more. Which one I need to look into it more. So I can't really give my opinion. But you do expect them to be more connected, right?
I mean, there's things that you can't explain. Make no sense. Like you can't rationalize things that they did. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's okay. So it's like apparently all those things come together. But the most we're sangre caliente, hot-blooded, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We're hot-blooded, and apparently that seems to help in some sort of a way for us to channel. But a lot of it is the DNA, and the soul seems to have picked that DNA, whatever your DNA is, and for whatever purpose you're here, your soul picked your DNA for a reason. So I think that if we had to say our most valuable asset in human form, to me, is literally figuring out your DNA, understanding it better, and working with it.
Yeah, I think that could be beneficial to anybody, right? Like understanding how you're composed, like how you're made up.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we add to that the Akashic Records talked about how this 2022, we had to do a lot of ancestral cleansing, clearing, releasing, letting go of. It's like trauma. Remember they talked about how we were seeing a lot of trauma come out? I mean, when we started seeing that whole George Floyd thing, when I looked at it from like a level more above, like more Akashic Records, I was just seeing a lot of trauma being played out.
Yeah, I remember that.
The reactions of people and things. And I'm not saying there's no reason to fight or there's a reason to fight. I'm not politically saying anything about this. What I'm saying is when I was looking at it from outside, I said, this is a lot of ancestral trauma. And it's time to clear it out. And it was being thrown in everyone's face to see worldwide because we're supposed to become aware of how important it is for us to know where we came from, what those individuals went through, and us to begin to understand it and clear it out because we're carrying it. Even though you don't know it, you're carrying it.
Yeah, we do carry it.
So this is the year to concentrate on releasing that.
When we can get a grasp on that, we start to understand ourselves energetically very differently.
Yep. And then so that's something that was already in my awareness and I was already concentrating on. I really wanted to work on that. I was going to try and dedicate myself to concentrate more on that in 2022. Actively try to figure out my ancestral lineage to the point where I knew what things I needed to pinpoint and get cleared out and get in or bring to my attention. Sometimes you need to give something attention before you clear it out. You can't just go, let's get rid of it. No, you got to look at it and say, oh, I have this. This is something. And it doesn't start with me. Its point of origin is over there. And now the way I function when I do ancestral clearing, me personally, I don't like to destroy it because you're basically, in my opinion, you're devalidating. Is that a word?
Devaluing?
No, like unvalidating. Like
not validating.
Not validating? Can you say devalidating?
I don't know if that's a word.
I don't know. Anyway, sorry guys. You're not validating an experience that one of your ancestors had. And I think that's like, it's like, let me just get rid of it. It doesn't suit me. And I think that's a little, I don't know. It might be Lucia, but I feel like that's a little inconsiderate and mean. So what I like to do is I like to send it back to its point of origin.
You know what this reminds me a lot about? Family constellations. Like energetically speaking.
Do we send it back to its point of origin?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you don't say the point of origin, but you take responsibility for your stuff and you give your parents, their parents, what's theirs. You don't take then we're talking about inherited family trauma, right? This is something that fascinates me immensely. And I think when we're holding on to their trauma, it becomes our trauma. And if we can heal it within ourselves, we're healing it for them too. So it's not like you're just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for them too. But we can carry things that aren't ours. That's a reality. Like that's something that is, I mean, I've experienced it. You've experienced it. A lot of the people that we do readings for do.
A lot of people don't know the really backstory to their ancestors. They'll know like, oh, my mom, my grandma, my great-grandma. And most people don't know further than that, including us.
I mean, and I don't think you need to know all the details. And that's something that I've been told in readings over and over again. Like, you don't need to know every detail. I think if we can tune into the emotions and some things that we know, sometimes it can be details that come up, but we don't have to have the whole picture. We need to know what emotions that brings up and how it's affecting us. If we can pinpoint those things, that many times we can still heal it, even though we don't have the full story.
I don't know. I think it's because that's the way, like I'm a visual person. So I think in that sense, I like to figure out where it's coming from, what it is, so I can visualize in my mind. And that's how I work. I clear it out or I get,
that helps. Yeah.
I work with it better.
But then we have to make sure that's not our ego getting involved, right? that wants to know all, because I think ego can get involved in that sense. Like wants to know every little detail, because if I don't every detail, I can't fix it. And I don't believe that everybody needs to, depends on your situation. Everything's very individual, but for a lot of people, they need to release the emotional aspect of it. They don't have to have every single detail. They just need to know what they're feeling and what they're holding on to. Sometimes through an Akashic Records reading, you can understand some of that. That can come through. It could be a past life stuff too. Then we're not really going into DNA. We're going into RNA. And I think we should do an episode about DNA versus RNA. And that's something that we don't really teach that in our course, but it's something that I think it's fascinating how they're different and how they can affect us and how
I don't know. What's the difference? I've never looked into this.
Okay, because this is something I learned when I did my level 2. So DNA is everything that like we inherit from our family. It's everything from like our family lineage, like what we're talking about now, right? Our body, our genetics, things that we kind of learn in biology class, but also, within our like family, inherited family trauma, like we're talking about. And RNA is the soul. So that there we're going into past lives.
So you're talking, okay.
Yeah. So the RNA has been like all the past lives, other universes that we might have been in, our soul has been in, things that we've learned.
It's really hard to do that, right? You say my soul, not me, my soul.
Like things you've learned, things that have become light and things that are pending or that we need to evolve on or lessons we need to learn. So obviously, when we talk about the Akashic Records, we're going a lot into the RNA information because that does come up.
I think that's really weird. That's the label that...
That's a label that at least my teacher put to it.
Because RNA is something that currently is being put into people.
Yeah.
But just with an M in front of it, right?
Yeah.
And you're calling the soul aspect of it RNA.
Maybe this is coming up for a reason. We're going to do a whole episode on this.
But I have more to talk about DNA. So
I just wanted to have
that label. Okay.
Yeah. No, that label came to me through the course that I did for level 2. And this was a couple years ago. And I found it fascinating separating those two. Maybe you don't have to separate them, but I think it's interesting to separate it because like if I look at family constellations, I look at, for example, Akashic Record readings. Akashic Record readings is very much about the present, but it goes into both DNA and RNA. It goes into past lives. It goes into the present, what you're going through now, but it can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And family constellations, to me, it focuses more on the DNA stuff most of the time. I could be wrong though. It doesn't really go into past lives. It goes into what you're going through now and why you're holding on to trauma that's not yours, for example, or why you're holding on to the pain that your mom felt when she lost this or this other person. Like that happened to me, right?
Mm-hmm. I never really labeled them differently. And what I remember from the Patreon that I channeled, that the only thing that I was visually seeing when I was channeling the information about because I did an episode about DNA, that was really interesting. Actually, I really enjoyed it. I remember there's a part of our DNA that's not activated. So it's there and it's an ability to be turned on or awakened, but our DNA isn't in full blown capabilities of functioning the way it could. That's something that it's part of the human evolution. It starts waking up little by little. But so my soul had once made me see how a lot of really important little tiny specks or parts of the DNA, I'm seeing the strand kind of thing, and parts of it, boop, 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 I have pieces of it around. Those are actually, if you want to call it encoded information, that's information that has to do with the soul. So you're calling it RNA. I didn't have a word for it. So it sounds like the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go into Greg Braden, he says that the scientists call it junk DNA because they don't know what the F it does. So they call it junk DNA. I started reading Greg Braden's book, but I didn't get further into it. I wanted to read it more because I wanted to see what he had to say about that because he did a whole book about it. I think it's called The God Code, the book. So what's really interesting is that I was really getting into the DNA stuff. And personally speaking, I was thinking it seems to be a really active thing, because not only is 2022 supposed to be about us clearing that ancestral trauma that's part of our DNA, also the Akashic Records were actively talking more on the Patreon about DNA and how important it is, right? And that junk DNA that Greg Braden would talked about how soul information's on there, right? We just don't really know how it's functioning there, what it's doing. And at the same time, there's parts of your DNA that are not activated that might not be activated in our lifetime, but partially maybe they will be. We don't know. I think that's part of our ascension process. So if you stay in 3D, I think it's going to stay non-activated. I think if you go to 4D, I think parts of those will start to be activated, but that's how I see it from my perspective, the way I've been shown it. But so I found it really interesting that the Akashic Records were talking a lot about DNA lately and giving me a lot of stuff about that. And then yesterday, I think it was, the episode came out, Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia, which I can't share because Gaia doesn't let me share those episodes. But if you have Gaia, go to the season 15, the latest episode of Cosmic Disclosure. And they're talking about part of it, they're talking about DNA and how there's 12 different alien species that have manipulated our DNA so they can have almost like some sort of word in what goes on Earth. It's almost like, how I think about it, to explain it better. It's like you want to be part of an elementary school process of what they're going to teach the kids because you're really invested in the future of your community. But you don't have a child there, so you can't really put your word in. So you decide to have a child so that you can go and put your word in and say, well, I want this to happen here. I support this. So that's what kind of like these alien entities or beings are doing. They're manipulating DNA. So part of them is in our DNA so that they can actually come in and say, well, I want this to happen on Earth, or I don't want that to happen, or I support this, or I don't support that, right? So 12, that means that everyone around the world is going to have at least one of them. I don't know if they've mixed themselves up as well, but at least one of them. So we are highly connected to them. And that just shows me another level of how much we don't know about our DNA. Mm-hmm. Before I had heard that from Cosmic Disclosure, I had heard, I had read the Sitchin book. What was his first name again? I don't know. Sitchin's book, he talks about the Sumerian tablets. And so Sitchin talks about how we were seeded, I guess you could say, by the Anunnaki. Right? So like the Anunnaki came and created us, because I think the perspective was, I would have to go back and read again because I didn't finish it and I didn't, it was a while ago and I have to get back to it. But I think it was kind of like we were here to kind of be their slaves, to kind of accomplish something that they needed from us, and they needed, someone to do the hard labor, and so they created humans. And so in my mind, I always thought that we had a potpourri. I mean, Sitchin has said we had an Anunnaki from that Sumerian tablets. I always believed we had a potpourri. But now, Cosmic Disclosure, what this guy is saying is that there's 12 different. So maybe some of us have potpourris and maybe some of us just have one.
It's interesting.
It's for a collective that cannot even prove or communicate properly with aliens. They're so connected to us.
There's just so much we don't know,
There's so much we don't know.
And our human brain tries to convince us that all that exists is what we see here. And it's so not true. Like, that's something I struggled with my whole life. Like, if I can't prove it, I can't see it, then it doesn't exist. Even though internally I was feeling things and I wanted to push past that. And maybe I received signs. Maybe there were other ways that I got that proved to me. But it's this shift that we all need to make as a collective and say, there's some, like, just because I don't see it or I don't know about it yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think even when we're just talking about DNA, there is so much we don't understand about even the human body. like the brain, right? The brain, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, like there's so many things that we don't.
Well, we believe that the
grasp.
brain does the thinking process for us, but now we've talked about ghosts, and we know that they're intellectual.
Yeah.
And they can communicate, and they're still speaking that language that they were speaking when they're incarnated, and their brain's not there anymore. So I think our brains don't function the way we think it does.
Probably not. Now my dog's dreaming.
Is she?
Last episode, Sandy was dreaming. Now Wendy was dreaming. Now Sandy's dreaming.
Aww.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to open our brains, our minds to seeing things maybe in a way we haven't ever before.
I think in our lifetime, there will be more intellectual connection with the aliens in our lifetime.
Maybe, yeah.
I really feel that.
What do you predict?
I predict that some people will start literally having one-on-one encounters with aliens. I just don't think everyone, because I don't think everyone's, in our lifetime, I don't think everyone's going to be ready. But I do think that there's going to be much more people being able to communicate, connect, or see them. And I say them because I don't think that it's just one race. I think that there's different races.
Yeah, I don't think there's one race either. At least that's not what I see.
No. Is there, I mean, you don't look into aliens a lot, but is there like a race that fascinates you more or you like more?
I don't really connect with that info. I also don't look into it as much as you do.
Yeah.
Not really. I'm such a grounded person too. Like I always talk about my astrology chart and my natal chart and stuff, and how I am so grounded in this experience and the emotions that I feel in this kind of incarnation, that I disconnected different information than you, which is fine. I think it brings this interesting dynamic into the podcast and into our even channelings. But I am open to all that.
Like
you're very much up here. Yeah, I'm down here. I'm grounded. I'm like, okay, what are you feeling? What's going on? Like, which is great. I think it's great to have both of those energies, because I think we're able to talk about more things, and you open my mind up to things and I open your mind up to things too, which I think is much needed. And
I remember when I used to not think about or know or even think it was true that there were aliens. And then the time that I started looking into it and believing, I'm like, how did I not know? Like, I know it's so weird because I've never had one in front of me like I have you, but I'm like, now I know. Yeah. I know that they exist. I know it. But I know it to the point like almost like I have a neighbor that's an alien or something, you know? Like that's how much I know it.
I think the fact that we all are more, well, obviously we had all these things come out about the FBI and all those things, right? Saying like, this is actually something, encounters that we've seen. I think that helps,
and
of course.
They leaked like not really good information. They did it on purpose.
Yeah, of course. And they did it at an interesting time too. But I think it's just stuff we were already thinking about. But the fact that they were constantly saying, no, that doesn't exist. No, that never happened. No, this, it makes you doubt it. It makes you not open up to that idea. Now that we're like, okay, this could be a possibility.
It made you doubt it? It never made me doubt it.
So I'm not saying made me, but made many people doubt it. It's like, is this even, you know what I mean? People are like, is this even happening? So I think there's just there's more discussions about it. I think there's going to be more information coming out. I think people are more just, it's like we're more free to talk about it and experience and see how information comes through. Like it's not being suppressed as well. I think that's a good thing.
We're eventually going to have V on the podcast, and we can have her talk about her experience well, I'm saying this, I have to still talk to V.
Yeah, we haven't talked to V.
Yeah, sorry. But our idea is to have her back on, and maybe we can ask her if she's had an experience with a mantis being.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, she did it on one of her podcast episodes.
Oh, I didn't listen to that one.
I've only listened to maybe 4 or 5 episodes, but when I saw My Encounter with Alien, I'm like, gotta listen to it.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Definitely. I would love her to come on and just talk about so many different things, because she's such an interesting human being. Yeah. Interesting soul. I really look up to her a lot. I think she just has such great energy.
Yeah, she does.
Definitely. We're going to see how we can get her on. I'd love her to come on. And yeah, I think everything you're saying is really interesting. And I think we need to focus more on this like ancestral stuff and the DNA and how, and like, what are we holding on to? I think that's
we need to liberate ourselves. We need to liberate ourselves.
Yeah. And maybe asking ourselves those questions, like is there anything that I feel like I'm holding on to that isn't mine? And sometimes those are things that we don't understand. They're very repetitive. They're they just happen, or they just happen out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, why is this like for me, it was like physical pain in my body. Like there was no reason for it. I got tons of tests. They're like, you're fine. I was like, okay, I'm fine, but I don't feel fine. And it's like proven that we can hold on to pain in our body. And it could be not our pain. It could be stuff that our mom went through. It could be stuff our dad went through, our grandparents went through. And we're holding on to it. And then we're acting out in it, or we're feeling through it. So I think that could be a good focus that we all put into this year, into this new year.
Yeah. I mean, it's the body's so interesting because, and we were talking about DNA, and, you know, you have your cellular memory. Your cellular memory is not just from your ancestors, but it's also from your lifetime. And the best example I can think of that is Dad. Dad had an accident when he was a little boy, and he really, really hurt his knee. And every once in a while, that comes back.
Yeah.
His completely cured skin comes back and flares up and gets dry, and it almost looks like it's starting to. It's almost
like a scab.
Yeah, it's like a scab. Like it just healed from a car accident, but he had it when he was a little boy. And that's his cellular memory, and that there's something that his body's trying to tell him that he needs to look at and let go of. Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
How a scab can appear again. And there's no wound?
Like, what? There's just things we can't explain, right? And that's where I think, like I said, just because we can't, there's nothing tangible, like there's no explanation, that doesn't mean that it might not have something deeper to it. Like there might be something ancestral. We can't always just think with our brain. We need to think with, what's the origin of this? Where is it coming from? It doesn't have to be just from me. It could be from something before me.
Or it could be from the soul from another lifetime.
Of course, that too.
I mean, everybody knows the cases of Brian Weiss in his book, where these people are carrying things from past lives. I can tell you, I have something I carry from a past life that I know all the time. My stomach thing. Mm-hmm. I cannot have even the cat put even a little bit of pressure on my stomach.
It's interesting.
It freaks me out, and I know that it's not Lucia's. I know it. And I know that it has to do with some sort of like wound or something from another lifetime. I never really looked into the details, but that's something that I need to work on this year with my ancestral DNA workings.
Yeah, I think we need to go more into that with our channeling. Yeah. Maybe do some more episodes on that. I definitely would like to get into that more this year, for sure.
Which aspect? Past lives DNA kind of thing?
Yeah, like maybe do an episode on past lives DNA, how like channel about that, but also bring in like real life experiences we've had or other people have had. And then on the other, like the flip side of that is just just like family constellations, like we were talking about, inherited family trauma. What are some examples of those? How can those manifest in our body?
Did you know, for example, that a lot of people who experienced sexual abuse when they were younger tend to have weight issues when they're older, because they're subconsciously, their body and their whole system is trying to keep them protected. So by keeping what they think their body is in an unbalanced state, or some of them would subconsciously think it's unattractive, then I won't be put into the position where this can happen to me again.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. Yeah.
Like we've talked about this before with other Akashic Records readers when we did like the retreat. And we were talking about that, and we had quite a few women in the group that were readers who said, yeah, I had sexual abuse issues when I was young, and I cannot No matter how many diets I do, no matter how much I work out, no matter how good I am about my diet and my routine, I cannot keep the weight off. And it seems to be that they're subconsciously, their body's holding on to as much as they can because it needs to keep them protected. It really believes that it's protecting them.
Yeah, I've seen that come up in readings.
So many things.
Emotional aspects can be...
I think they're the worst. The emotional ones are the worst.
Quite interesting, yeah. I wouldn't say they're the worst, but yeah, they can be quite tricky.
Well, they're the worst for people to be able to accept, confront, and release. That's what I mean by the worst. Like,
yeah,
they're the hardest. That's what I mean. They're the hardest.
The hardest, yeah.
You know? So it's really interesting. That's also considered cellular memory. That's now impregnated. And the more important thing to state here that I would say is that person going to have a child? Because if that person doesn't heal that and has a child, they might be passing on that same DNA structure with that fear ingrained in it, recorded in the DNA. And it's maybe that child also has issues with their body or issues with the fear of being not respected, their limits, or, depends on each soul how it comes in with their body, and how they take it. But we have to remember that whatever we don't clear out, we pass on to our children. That's why we have to actively release what our ancestors passed on to us, because they didn't let go of it, right? If they had, we wouldn't have it.
You know why? For some reason, I haven't read this book, but this literally just came up to my mind. This book called The Body Keeps the Score. I keep seeing this book pop up everywhere on social media, and I'm going to start to read it really soon. And it talks about kind of like the brain, the mind, and the body, and healing trauma. So I don't know, maybe you guys, if that's something that fascinates you, maybe it could be an interesting book to read. I'll report on it once I start reading it. But to me, it could be linked to some of the stuff we're talking about. I might be wrong, but for some reason, they're kind of giving me to talk about that book for now.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, apparently it's a great book. Lots of people have recommended it. So,
well, that's more your thing. Like we were talking about today. Like for me, it's more being out there. You resonate a lot.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
With trauma and all those subjects.
So much. I mean, I still think about studying family constellations. It's something that I'm really considering this year. Because remember, like with the pandemic, a lot of people went online with their courses, these courses that weren't online before. Now all of a sudden you can do anything online. And with the constellator that I always used back home. And I really love her method. She's helped me so much. So it'd be somebody that I personally would consider studying with, but it's in Spanish, of course.
So I think that people need to really up their game this year with giving the attention. Like you said in a way where like, there's so much going on that we don't know about. Well, this is the same. I think we need to start bringing our attention to our DNA and all the things that might be in there, whether it's our ancestors, ours, trauma, past life. Like, I think we need to start really clearing that out, because I think that this is that really good year to do it.
You know what it feels like? It feels like it's like aligned to, like things will, like it'll be, I don't know if I want to say easier, because healing trauma is not easy, but it feels like the energies are like prepared for it. Like a lot of us might feel more prepared for it. Like, I don't know, like more open to it, energetically speaking. And like, it feels like we've been saying for the last few years, like even learning like to read your own Akashic records, or learning new spiritual things, or developing your own abilities. As long as we've been doing our work, everything can go quicker. Things can kind of progress in a beautiful way. We're not being so held back. So I think even with healing, like if we really put in the work, we really focus our energy, our intentions, this could be the perfect year to really close those cycles and say, I'm not carrying this anymore. I've healed it. And it doesn't have to be completely healed, but at least you've started that process.
Yeah.
It's just proposing that and like saying, I'm going to do it. I'm ready
and
for it.
there's a lot of souls that come back and reincarnate into the same lineage. So if you put in some good work, your soul might be coming back into the same lineage, and your soul's like, ooh, this one's easier. I did the work in the other lifetime, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of nice to think about. I know that, you know, consciously speaking, you're not going to remember it, but the soul's going to have that really cool experience of being able to reincarnate back into the same family lineage and experiencing it being different because work had been done by the soul in another lifetime.
Do you find that a lot? Like, I think some people ask, like, have I had past lives with my family, like their immediate family? Like, what do people ask that in readings with you? I get that question quite a lot.
But,
or like, who in my life right now have I had past lives with? Like, in past lives is really tricky with Akashic record readings because, like we always say, they don't bombard us with information. We get the information that we need and that we're going through right now. So a past life that's relevant to something you're going through now will come up. They're just not going to tell you about every past life you've had. It's just not feasible.
I feel like the way that the Akashic records made me see it is the soul jumps usually has 4 dedicated, what do you call it, biological lineages? What would you call it? Ancestral? I don't know what to call it.
I'm not sure.
Like 4 different families, lineages that it seems to incarnate into.
Oh, interesting. No, I never heard that or felt that.
It seems like it can decide to do work on one of those because it seems to already work on those. Because it wants different experiences. Sometimes they might experience and they want to experience a more indigenous experience. And then maybe it wants to experience something more like it's going to go to a Nordic country. And then after it's going to decide to go like Africa or, you know, or after, you know, it might go to Asia. Like those are different lineages. And you'll do readings and you'll hear the soul say, oh, you know, I've gotten individuals who there's amazing stories came out of like living in Buddhist towns and things like that. And these whole storylines come into play and come out from the reading. And it's really cool. But that person in this lifetime is obviously not in that Buddhist town.
Yeah.
They didn't make it into that lineage. So I know that it's a really nice feeling to think that souls always come back to this family. Like, oh, my son, I think my son's my grandfather, for example, right? And that does happen.
It does happen, yeah.
It does happen.
Yeah.
But also, it's not a rule.
Oh, it's not a rule. It depends on your soul, the soul contracts, depends on a lot of stuff. I was just wondering if that's a question you got a lot because I do get that. Not a lot, but it comes through sometimes, especially in the context of like I have so much trauma or healing with my family, with specific family members. Have I had past lives with them?
Yeah. I mean, I've had readings where like they'll ask about a child that's not too old and I'll hear myself ask them like, wait, and I'll get it. I'll be like, wait. Like, there's something about some other family member. And I'll say like, you know, your grandma, I don't know. I'm giving an example, but I've had quite a few readings where like I'll pinpoint a position in the family that's associated with that child that they're asking about. And it ends up being that like, yes, she's just like the grandma. I always think that it feels like my grandma. And so, you want to hear something really weird?
Okay.
I'm constantly thinking that Aurora is another version of your soul.
Of me?
No, not you, Lorena. Your soul.
Yeah, of my soul, I mean.
Yeah. Because I'm constantly saying, Lorena. Oh my gosh, no, like, Lorena.
I think
Lorena.
maybe that, I don't know if that's because I don't think that's at a soul level. I do feel very connected to Aurora at a soul level, but I don't think it's a version of my soul. I just think that there's a lot.
I think so, because I'm totally convinced sometimes that I have you next to me so many times in the day.
And she does say some interesting things about me, doesn't she?
Lorena, she talks about you every day and she hasn't seen you in 2 years.
Yeah.
Every time she packs a fake bag, like she'll grab her little bag and she'll put in like 20 pairs of socks and one t-shirt and she goes, going to Raina's.
That's so cute.
She's like, going to Raina's. I actually think that's...
You should ask about that.
Yeah. You should
have to ask some
you should ask
questions.
your records and see if they get a yes or a no, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, I like that.
But
challenge accepted.
so, what am I saying here with that example? Not only can your soul be born in the same lineage, your soul can be incarnated twice. Like
You
in
mean,
this
like,
one lifetime timeline. Because the soul can have more than one experience in this one time. Right? Some people call that twin flames. Some people believe in twin flames.
Oh, okay.
What is twin flames? Twin flames is supposedly finding the other half of your soul that's incarnated in another body. Mm-hmm. It's like a level up from a soulmate. I don't know how other people categorize it, but that's the way I see it. We did a whole episode on that. Yes. So if you were to ask, your twin flame would be Aurora.
Maybe.
You guys have a lot of similarities as well, but yet you're totally different signs.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we have in common. It's interesting.
So you got stuck with me twice. Wow.
Darn it. Darn it.
Damn.
That's just at a like mental level, that's really hard to grasp, that idea. Because I'm here, I'm living my life. How my soul, you know what I mean?
I know.
Nuts. Like my brain just exploded. Anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Do you want to add anything else before we...
Well, Mom thinks that Aurora is a reincarnation of Grandpa. Mm-hmm. And I had a very, very, very close relationship with Grandpa.
Mm-hmm. I don't know about that, though.
Oh, Wendy's barking. No, Wendy, no. Sorry. Well, Grandpa was born on the same day that Aurora was born, Uruguay time.
Interesting.
You didn't know that?
I remember now that you mentioned that, yeah.
Cayman Islands was another day because different time zones. But for Uruguay, when Mom got the notification, Aurora was born, it happened on the 22nd.
Interesting.
And that was the day Granddad was born. And Mom goes, I knew Grandpa was coming back. Or in her case, I knew Dad was coming back, she said.
I'm going to have to dig deeper into that.
So that means that you were Grandpa and your soul was Grandpa and Aurora. You were Grandpa and then Grandpa died and then you came back. Your other half came back again as Aurora.
Okay. People can't see my face right now, but... What? Okay. Whoa.
All right. Just I'm gonna give you your Taurus time to absorb that.
Let me absorb that and I'll circle back.
And then work on the trauma, and then we'll talk about it another time. I'm convinced of it, though. I am convinced of it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to chat about that off air. All right. So, like we mentioned in the previous episode, we're working on level 2, so we should have that out soonish. We're not sure. We'll announce the date once we have that prepared, but we're trying to do things as complete, as kind of aligned as possible. So we're putting in a lot of work for that. And of course, we still have our Patreon, we have our Instagram, our Facebook. So make sure you're following us on those platforms if you're interested. And yeah, we'll be back next week with a new episode, with new topics. If there are any themes, topics, things you feel like you want us to talk about, feel free to message us on Instagram or Facebook or even on our email, which is soultribepodcast@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear your feedback. We always like to make sure that we're kind of like, creating content for you guys. So we'd love to hear your feedback on that. Maybe I'll even do like a little question box on our Instagram, see if we get some feedback there too. But we have some exciting things that we want to work on this year for the podcast, so we hope you guys subscribe and kind of share any episodes that you think anybody or any loved ones would kind of enjoy. And it's going to help us get our message across and help us, keep growing spiritually and allowing others to do that alongside us. So we really appreciate all your support and everything. So we will see you guys next week with a new episode, and we hope you guys have a great week. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you.